Hi everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Genre Equality Podcast. I'm Hidzir.
And I'm Isa.
As we mentioned last month, our co-host Hardi has unfortunately decided to leave the podcast. Well, this particular podcast, primarily because his work has become a bit overwhelming, so he can't dedicate the necessary amount of time he would need to really make his opinions worthwhile and watch all the things we require him to watch for genre equality.
Mm-hmm.
But like although like he's gone, he's always welcome back, and I'm sure he'll pop back in once in a while in the next few months or years. But we would like to give like a shout out to Hadi lah, because he was one of the co-founders of the podcast
Yep.
and quite a foundational member of genre equality.
Yeah, we did a good 2 years of podcasts with him. And it was always interesting for him to kind of like lean in with the opinions that he has and whether or not he found a movie interesting or were falling asleep at.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very clear black and white. Did I stay awake for it? Kind of judging criteria,
Yeah.
and but it was fun lah. I mean, he had a more of a. I would say that he was like more of the layman amongst us, which is actually the most valuable judging member, because I think most people don't watch things with as critical or as an eye as we do lah, because we look into subtext and things like that. Whereas Hadi is like, is it like fundamentally, is it fun? If it's
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. I mean, we're gonna miss him for sure. But
yeah.
I think you guys can look forward to us having more guests coming around. Now with the new
Hmm.
format with just Hidzir and I.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we'll be having a guest next month actually.
Yeah. If you listen to our spin-off podcast, which is, as you now know, another evolution of genre equality, is that it's now become a channel. Genre equality will still remain our flagship show, but now it's a channel encompassing many other podcasts, which we'll begin to add in the next few months and years, lah, of course. And our second podcast is a podcast called Behold, where we go beyond the worlds of sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, to talk about all the different pop cultural things. Yeah, there's TV and movies there too, but we'll talk about other things as well, like books and music in the coming months. So if you haven't checked out Behold, it's hosted by me and Isa as well. Please do so. You can find the links on our Mixcloud. You can
Yep.
find the links on our Facebook page. So definitely check Behold out as well, if you think that we are a good barometer of what's good or not.
Yeah. Well, hopefully. Thank you guys again for sticking with us for what are we? We're passing. It's gonna be 2 years, right? Soon, or is it two and a
Yeah,
half years
yeah.
already?
2.5 lah. We'll reach the 3 year mark in January, so we're in the 2.5 year mark at the moment. But anyways, despite Hadi not being here, we do have a lot of stuff to talk about. We're
Mm-hmm.
quite excited. A lot of them are Hadi's favorites as well. We'll be talking about Rick and Morty, the back half of the new season, the final seasons of Star Wars: The Clone Wars,
Yep.
the final season of Shira and the Princesses of Power, the third season of Westworld. We just saw Justice League Dark Apocalypse War, which ends the DC animated shared universe. A bunch of other stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Rick and Morty, Justin Roiland debuted a new show on the same week that Rick and Morty came back, called Solar Opposites. I'll be talking about a new show from Greg Daniels, who is the creator of King of the Hill, The Office, Parks and Recreation, etc., etc. He has a new show out this week called Space Force, but we'll be talking about his genre effort called Upload.
Yep.
And Isa will be back with a new edition of Anime Corner, where he highlights, basically the best of the current anime season.
Yep.
Right at the end, though, I mean, we're going to talk about the big news. I personally do not give a shit about release the Snyder Cut. I've never cared about it, but it is big news,
It
so
is
we
big
will
news.
talk about
Yeah.
we'll talk about it at the end. And on the DC front as well, it's been a tumultuous week for them. Ruby Rose quit as Batwoman, and we'll give our thoughts on that as well. But first off, let's kick off with the latest season of Rick and Morty. It returns from a mid-season hiatus to deliver the final 5 episodes of season 4.
Yep.
As you know, it's created by Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland. What do you think about the back half of season 4? And now keep in mind, as of this recording, we didn't manage to watch the season finale, but having seen 4 or 5 episodes, I think it's enough to give a proper judgment on how the second half of season 4 fared.
Um. So I had to rewatch the first half of the season, right? Because I just wanted to like kind of see how it would tie into everything. And I have to say the split down the middle of the season is quite disparate, right? Like I feel
Mm,
the second half of the season, at least the 4 episodes because so far, leans a lot more into very meta
mm,
kind of like topics, or just like meta in terms of like the genre, in terms of storytelling, and there's a lot of that going on right now, as opposed to the first half of the season where we kind of got like a through line
mm,
with the first 5 episodes. So it's been strange, I think. I'm not really sure where to place it. It feels out of place because it's not really a continuation of the arcs that happened before that.
mm.
So but it of course, we've never really faulted Rick and Morty for anything. I'm just wondering if there is a reason why this last 4 episodes has been like that, and whether it's gonna show up in the last episode itself.
I don't know. Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland seem to have long stretches in between seasons and in between mid seasons.
Mm.
It seems that it takes them a long time to write and animate Rick and Morty, and considering how frequently dense and ingenious much of the show is, I can understand why lah. Because they're trying to push the envelope audaciously in terms of creative, in terms of humor, in terms of meta.
Yep.
Um, yeah, but I think the back half of this season also shows that maybe Rick and Morty does tend to use self awareness and pop culture references as a crutch sometimes.
Yep.
Um, I liked all the episodes that we've seen, 4 to 5, to varying extents. But I think probably, in my opinion, I think the standout episode that I just want to dive deeper is the kind of densely layered meta casserole that was the premiere,
Yeah.
uh, where Rick and Morty are trapped on a literal story train with literary devices as obstacles as they try to escape their own unconventional storytelling conventions
Yep.
before the train, which is a thinly veiled metaphor for the show, goes off the rails.
Yeah.
And it's all done, there's a literal deus ex machina at the end. And each new car is another element of past stories and more than a few markers that suggest that none of this is actually happening. Non-canon, which is another hallmark of Rick and Morty. You know, at the end of it all, I thought it was a way for the writers, Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, to sort of exercise their anxieties over making the show.
Mm-hmm.
How can we do things differently? And is our unconventionality itself a convention? Which is kind of one way that they themselves critiqued their own show in the premiere episode. Did
Yep.
you think that was what they were trying to go for?
Uh, yeah, I guess so. I mean, like, obviously, when doing storytelling that's this far out, right? Right.
Mm,
And the medium animation kind of allowing for that. There are some sort of concerns, I think, as storytellers, as to like how far are you pushing it. On the one hand, you're leaning into these very kind of like deep and intense ideas and making fun of them, but at the same time, you also want to satirize tropes and so on and so forth. So it could very well be. I mean, the main thing for that particular episode that got me is that because we've also watched another animated series that has a similar train
mm,
analogy, right?
mhm.
That we reviewed recently, and I just couldn't really shake that. I was just kind of wondering if they were drawing a bit from that. I mean, of course, the it's just image alone, but the whole idea of being on a train and that being a journey and so on and so forth, right? And now with the new
Mhm.
Snowpiercer series
Mm.
just out as well, I was thinking like, oh, okay, right. It's not entirely surprising that they would choose that metaphor for it, but yeah. Um, I I don't know. I don't know if it worked per se,
Mm.
right? I think it was an exploration of some concerns about like the nature of what they're doing with Rick and Morty.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to have the characters themselves kind of explore that. But because they are characters in the story, like there's no running from your own canon, lah, so to say.
Yeah, yeah. I felt that, like writing an episode like that, it's a bit of a dangerous exercise given how a lot of these ideas are ones that the show has engaged with before,
Yep.
but never in such a threaded way. And it puts all these gags to, I think, a good purpose, nodding to anyone who might see the show's approach as becoming gradually formulaic, and using that approach to acknowledge how fighting against formula can be formulaic as well.
Yep.
Um, Traveling through, the different style cars, each with their own purpose, makes it feel like Rick and Morty are fighting their own conventions and criticisms. Like you said, in the style of Snowpiercer, lah.
Yeah.
But instead of the different classes, it's different tropes that Rick and Morty has employed. But I think here's the key, that even when going so deep into meta with so many asides into how the show has become a merchandising machine and how male writers perceive feminist stories, etc., etc. Like beyond all the denseness of all that, Rick and Morty never becomes a drag, and it's still fun and it's still funny,
Yep.
and it's hard to not at least smile at the scope of the thing as it was happening.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, so I'm curious to see how they tie it up. I'm hoping there's some sort of like, they kind of pull the threads together from the episodes that we had so far.
Mm.
But I'm not sure. Even if it doesn't, like, it's been a pretty solid season so far.
Yep.
All things considered.
Yeah, yeah. On the flip side to that episode, though, I mean, like you do have like one note joke episodes, like the face hugger episode,
Yeah.
which just goes to show that, like, the creators are still human, to deliver like something that is okay, just okay,
Yeah.
But for the most part, episodes like the vat of acid episode, which had emotional stakes for Morty,
Yep.
with an inventive twist on the game saving concept and the prestige,
Yeah.
with some truly soul shaking existential implications with really funny jokes. Like, I think that's kind of the train, so to speak, where Rick and Morty really excels. That's the particular car that they're very good at.
Writing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. I really did enjoy the fake acid vet episode. That was I think it's the standout for me for this particular episodes that we've seen so far.
Yep.
Yeah, just like something different, and again, like Rick establishing the fact that he's always right, in the
Yeah.
most kind of like convoluted way possible.
And obnoxiously as well.
Yeah.
I feel that this season overall, probably, well, at least the back half of the season, not the strongest stretch of Rick and Morty episodes I've seen, but still really, really good and really, really inventive. I think I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. Do you have any concluding thoughts in the rating?
Yeah, pretty much. I think we've covered most of it. I'm gonna give it a 7 for this
Okay.
these cover episodes that we've seen so far.
Yep. Okay, so that was the back half of season 4 of Rick and Morty. I do feel that them bucking against traditional emotional arcs or character arcs or story arcs is starting to do. At first, it's very ingenious, but it's now starting to feel like I'm lacking any sort of investment in the
Yeah.
in the show.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of how clever it is, lah, and sometimes it feels like clever for clever's sake, and maybe that's why our rating has gone down a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've done some really, really good job with some of the side characters that we've had, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of peaked for me with the revelation of kind of evil Morty, that whole like Citadel of Riggs and that whole thing, and then Summer's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like character progression, like
Yep.
all of that was really, really good and solid stuff. I think
Mm.
all of that happened before they announced that they were re-signed for what, 70 something episodes.
70 episodes, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's just like the fatigue kind of setting in and all of that. We will really have to see. But I mean, we've got a good couple of episodes here, but nothing like mind blowing or like nothing that wowed me in particular.
Yeah, yeah. I actually felt the first 5 episodes from season 4 were a stronger batch.
Yeah, I think so too.
At least in terms of just pure humor, lah.
Mm-hmm.
I just laughed out loud more with the first half. But anyways, Rick and Morty is still a very good show, and we'll still recommend it, lah. Like, it hasn't like gone off the rails or anything. So do check it out. If you haven't seen it, it's on Cartoon Network, and Adult Swim, of course.
Yep.
Next up, we're moving on to the final season of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. In a year where a lot of our favorite genre shows like BoJack Horseman, The Good Place, and Steven Universe have ended, yet another seminal one comes to an end
Mm-hmm.
with season 7 of Dave Filoni's wonderful series. And with all due respect to the Mandalorian, which we loved, I think the Clone Wars is the best Star Wars series. Just because, like, Mandalorian might get there one day.
Yep.
It had a great one season, but that doesn't make it a great show. I've yet to see consistent good seasons from them.
Yeah.
Whereas I've seen a lot of them from the Clone Wars, and the Clone Wars has time and again delivered greatness, and some might argue is actually the best Star Wars product in the last 40 years, since Return of the Jedi, I think.
Yeah.
Like, all due respect to Rogue One and all of that, and the Mandalorian, but I think the Clone Wars pretty much nailed it, lah. And of course, This final season on Disney Plus comes after a 6-year hiatus. It was cancelled 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks to technological advances, the animation has been significantly improved. But best of all, the show feels like it never missed a beat. Season 7's 12 episode send off was largely intended to tie up loose ends and bid goodbye to a show and an era that holds a special significance for many Star Wars fans who were weaned on the prequels. But it also helped position its writer and its most memorable character, Asuka, for expanded roles in the franchise's future.
Yep.
Season 7 broke down into a trio of 4 episode arcs that filled in some of the gaps in the stories of two fan favorites, Commander Rex and Asko Tano, who were introduced in the animated Clone Wars film that
Yeah.
preceded this. The first 4 episodes followed Rex, and the second 4 centered on Asuka, and the last 4 brought the two together to explain how they survived Order 66. The opening season arc paired Rex with the Bad Batch, a unit of misfit toy clones born with genetic abnormalities that gave them unique looks and a set of special abilities. It's easy to envision the Bad Batch, which Lucas himself created as the basis of a Star Wars spin on the A Team, I guess. And the middle episodes cleared up Asuka's actions after she left the Jedi Order in the Clone Wars in the season 5 finale. So it was nice to see Asuka again, and her team up with the Jedi hating Trace and Rafa forced her to wrestle with her role outside the Order. However, at this point in time, it seems that many fans, including myself, were kind of getting restless in the first 8 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the episodes were solid, but things like Asuka's love interest and the smuggling side quests felt a little extraneous. And the show was kind of on a time crunch to wrap everything up. This was the final season, after all. But if you've endured the long wait for the Clone Wars to come back and stuck with the slow start of the season, like, your patience dramatically paid off. The final 4 episode sequence, which covered the siege of Mandalore and Order 66, was peak Clone Wars,
Yep.
fulfilling Asuka's actress's Ashley Eckstein's promise that fans were in store for some of the best Star Wars ever made.
Mm-hmm.
And it was truly some of the best Star Wars ever made, or that I've ever seen at least, because the combination of the Clone Wars coincided with the Revenge of the Sith. I'm sorry. The story offered few surprises, right? Because it is a prequel, but the fourth part finale delivered some of the series' most cinematic and most emotionally affecting moments, as well as a host of elegantly constructed ties to the prequels and to the other Star Wars shows that bears Filoni's fingerprints, like Rebels and The Mandalorian. The finale had all the hallmarks of a Lucasfilm crescendo,
Yeah.
Lightsaber battles, ground assaults, a battle above a planet, a Sith futilely trying to seduce someone to the dark side. It was classic and it was affecting. It may have started slow, but it ended with a bang, so to speak. So the final 4 episodes was straight up 10 out of 10 masterclasses. The Clone Wars, I can't express enough how much the Clone Wars has redeemed the prequels.
Yeah.
The prequels were a joke, and the Clone Wars made it serious, made it like an important part of canon.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, like, the last 4 episodes being standout 10 out of 10s, but others made the first 8 probably range somewhere between 7s. They're about 7, so I think in total, it'll probably be an 8 out of 10 season. So I had to like grade it a little differently. If you just wanted me to grade the finale, the last 4 episodes, it would be brilliant, 10 out of 10, masterpiece, mwah, chef kiss. But taken as a whole, probably the season, with its slow parts and the slow start, it's probably an 8 out of 10 for me.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. I mean, it's again, like you said, like, no other Star Wars franchise has delivered the kind of consistency that Clone Wars has, right? Like, Rebels was a romp, Mandalorian is great, but
Yeah.
Clone Wars has. How do you turn something, right, that was so meh into something meaningful, right? And
Yeah.
it's taken them a long time. It's taken them a lot of seasons to do it. But damn, like, it's a transformative work for a franchise that we know and love and hate at the same time, on so
Yeah.
many levels. It's really quite something. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that, man. And if you haven't caught up with the final season yet, right?
No, I'm not. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, I would recommend anybody who hasn't caught up to do so. If you've been burnt out by Star Wars lately, especially with the movies, we all have, whether or not you like the movies or hated the movies, the discussion has been so exhausting.
Yeah.
That like I almost don't want to watch Star Wars anymore. But the Mandalorian and the Clone Wars has really reignited kind of my love for this franchise, which has sort of simmered over the last 10, 20 years or so.
Yeah.
Next up, let's talk about the third season of Westworld, TV's probably most prominent series about autonomy and automatons. Uh, First of all, it's been heavily documented
Mm-hmm.
that this season was filmed in Singapore.
Yeah.
And for those of you unaware, genre equality is based in Singapore. So before we delve into the season, I just wanted to say, like, for me, it was a trip to see so many landmarks and locations that we're intimately familiar with
Yeah.
being showcased in such a gloriously beautiful way. It kind of makes me proud of our country's architecture, and it also adds a certain level of, I guess, realism to my viewing experience because we are already living in this futuristic looking city. The world that Westworld posits doesn't seem so far fetched
Yeah.
when you've been to LaSalle, you've been to Bencoolen, or you've been to the Helix Bridge, etc., etc. Right?
Yeah.
So before we get into the season, right? What do you think about the Singapore locations, and how do it make you feel?
It was strange. I think, like, especially when they started popping up. I went in fully knowing that I would see these things, right? But to see
Mm.
some of these places that we are really intimately familiar with, especially like kind of like the LaSalle area, right, where we hang out a lot.
Yeah, the
Um,
Bencoolen Street where we walk down like nearly every day. I mean, I guess before the COVID thing happened,
yeah,
we used to hang out there all the time.
yeah. So to be so intimately familiar with these spaces, right, it was
Yeah.
really kind of it really took me out of the
Mm.
experience sometimes, right? I'm just sort of for a moment like, okay, I kind of understand, what you're framing all of that, but the space isn't actually like that, or the space doesn't actually feel like that, and there was this weird kind of disconnect between that. And of course,
Co-
we have friends as well who are also extras on
In the
that.
show,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so like seeing all of them, it's nice. It's nice, to see these things. But at the same time, it's totally correct. Like, if we are living in a place that looks like it could be a dystopia, then we might
Mm-hmm.
very well be very, very close to that. So, it was fun, but at the same time, it was distracting for me. I think I was. There were moments where I was just kind of looking out for, like, oh, I know this place. Oh, I've stood there
Mm-hmm.
probably. And, like, been there with my friends and stuff like that. So, um, it was for me the train scene, and I think I had a conversation.
MRT, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the train scene. We had a kind of conversation about that when the series first came out and that episode debuted.
Mm-hmm.
Because to us that's kind of like a everyday kind of like very pedestrian experience for us to be taking
Mm-hmm.
the train here, right?
Yeah.
To see it repurposed for the Westworld world,
Several scenes actually, like throughout the entire season.
yeah, felt very odd.
Yeah.
It was at once familiar and very, very alien at the same time, just because of the way that they chose to portray it,
Mm. Yeah.
and its purpose there. And we were
Mm-hmm.
talking about, like, why is it like, I had a question whereby I was like, why is it our our train system passes off for something that you would see in like a near future dystopia, right?
Mm.
And I believe you were saying, like, don't forget it's a near future dystopia where these trains are meant for poor people. And it's like, oh yeah, well,
Yeah, yeah, and also like I mean, if you've been to America, if you've ridden their subway systems, I mean they frankly look like shit, lah.
mm,
So our subway system, so our MRT system, kind of looks futuristic to them, I guess.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it does have, the look of it, the aesthetic of it, all the hallmarks of what, a modern or a futuristic kind of like
Mm.
transportation system would be.
Essentially, hygiene is the future. If you've been to like the New York subway, it's just like graffiti and piss and shit and people masturbating in the corner, that kind of thing. It just looks terrible. So for them to see like a clean, well run train system that like shows up on time, that's futuristic for them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But all in all, I'm glad they chose Singapore. I think it really does look very beautiful on screen.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been to all those locations, Gotham Bar,
Hmm.
and all that. I've literally been to every single one of them. I've never seen them in that light there. I guess framing and lighting and things like that
Yeah,
really
it
adds a
does
lot, lah.
feel very much colder in the
Mm-hmm.
series. I mean, of course, like, short of the fact that we have tropical weather all year round.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, just the framing of it, like the scenes that were set in Singapore, outside of the kind of like strange stitching that they did,
Yep.
between like different cities and all of that, which will only be obvious to us, I guess, right? Like,
Yes.
I think it was the transition from the Helix Bridge into like the inside space that was like very clearly not from Singapore. Or
Mm.
even like some of the car chase scenes where the roads were Singapore, and then after that, some of them the roads weren't from Singapore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just weird that way, and a bit kind of like of a disconnect for me. But I mean, outside of
Mm.
that, yeah.
Yeah, lah, yeah, can't be helped to we live there. But I mean, beyond the shooting locales, let's discuss the third season as a whole. I think first of all, the big difference between this new season is that it is more streamlined. It's less structurally complex. It doesn't take place in Westworld.
Yep.
There is very little, if non-chronological timeline trickery going on,
Yep.
which is refreshing. I mean, there's some, lah, of course. It's Westworld, so you got to do that. But there's very little of it, which is a bit refreshing because it could have easily become a frustrating trope.
Yep.
Plot wise, we follow Dolores now, who has escaped into the real world, where she seeks to overthrow powerful men and corporations running this technological dystopia.
Yep.
Her primary opponent is a guy called Engarut Sarak, a trillionaire futurist who has developed a godlike system called Rehoboam. Much like the series devs, this is a deterministic system. When fed with all the world's data, is able to predict the past, present, and future of every living soul.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, such a thing isn't so far fetched. Essentially, big data is already mining our information for such a purpose, and it's already influencing or guiding our daily lives in a very real way. From subtly telling us what to buy or how to think and act
Yep.
to directly manipulating presidential elections. Rehoboam it's a very short leap, so it is a scary reality. So I give them like that.
Yeah.
But even before big data, our paths in lives are probably already predetermined from day one if you live in a capitalistic society, from
Mm-hmm.
genetics to upbringing to social class to gender to race, whatever you're born into, what we can or what we can do or cannot do or what we can become is already pretty much determined by the select few in power. Like the Rehoboam story is just a condensation of that. So what do you think about Westworld jumping out into the real world in season 3?
Um, I was excited at the end of season 2 just to kind of see where they took it, right?
Mm,
We already knew at the end of season 2 that Dolores had plans, she wants revenge, and so on and so forth. But I don't think I imagined it to take the form that it did.
mm,
With being out in the real world, this kind of like futuristic society where everything is kind of set in stone already. I mean, we're out of Westworld, but essentially it's still the same thing, right? Everything is guided, all the paths are laid out, the stories have been written.
our loops, right?
Yeah, exactly, like loops. And of course, like Dolores herself in her own meta way, as always comes back to that, right? Like say, I've
Mm,
escaped, the park, but you guys are still kind of like caught in that whole
yep.
system that you have created for yourself. You created your own god, and he has mandated that you basically live like the host that you have created.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so it I agree with you, it was refreshing not to have to do as much kind of like mental gymnastics to keep up with the story this time around,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time I feel like the more straightforward storyline required a bit more from the action sequences,
Mm,
and just basically the way they kind of set up. I had an issue with most of the action sequences themselves. I think
mm,
short of that one action piece with Tessa Thompson kicking ass around Delos's office, right? Everything
mm,
else felt extremely awkward.
mm,
And I'm not sure if poorly shot. Like it was strange. Like the lighting was a bit subpar for what I'm usually expecting from Westworld.
mm-hmm.
Maybe because they had a bit less control over that. But Maeve seemed really out of place as a character that knows how to fight.
Mm,
I totally didn't understand how she did simulation training against Nazis, but ends up becoming a ninja
mm,
slash samurai. Dolores is okay, but like just generally speaking, like almost everyone felt really, really strange and awkward during the action pieces, and that was kind of disconcerting for some reason for me. I felt like if you would, it needed those set pieces and it
Mm,
needed the action to kind of help to carry the season this time around. Just because
mm,
that's a big part, right? Like you got revolution, you got conflict, and all that plays out in violence as an
mm,
extension of the violence that we see in the park itself, playing out in the real world.
mm-hmm,
But it didn't quite land it for me. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
in general.
I Yeah, I agree. Like a lot of the action sequences disappointed, but I think more than that, like my issue with this season is that the lack of timeline trickery, basically the chronological story that we're presented, sort of exposed Westworld for me. Without the flash and the mental gymnastics that I'm doing every episode,
Yep.
it became like very clear that this isn't a good show. Um, that like the drama is very bad, the dialogue is poorly written,
Yeah.
the actors in their dramatic roles do a serviceable job, good job even, but like this season really like had nothing for Maeve, it had nothing for Bernard, it
Yeah.
had nothing for the Hemsworth brother that I forgot. I actually I don't know his name lah. Ed Harris really wasted his transition from Man in Black to Man in White.
Yeah.
It was very like quick and underwhelming.
Extremely.
um Aaron Paul, one of the best actors, on TV, again really like his dramatic backstory reveal after being built up for like 7 episodes, it was just, oh okay, that was it.
Yeah.
um yeah yeah, I just feel like a lot of the characters outside of Dolores, the main character, outside of Dolores, like everyone felt very underserved,
Yeah.
underwritten. Uh, it just felt very rushed in terms of their arcs, and
It did.
I didn't like the season.
No, me neither. I really kind of I usually for me like kind of Westworld is something that I have no issue. It This was trying, like trying to get through the season was trying, right?
Mm,
Despite the fact that there wasn't mental gymnastics, and I don't think it's just us because we enjoy that kind of thoroughfare, right? In
mm,
general, with the kind of things that we watch, it didn't quite blend it. Like Aaron Paul looked lost, like
mm.
all of the time, and it wasn't like part of the writing, the Dolores Prime and Charlotte.
Dolores.
Sorry, Dolores Prime.
They call her Halores.
Hilarious.
Halores, yeah.
Yeah, so Hilarious is like I mean by far kind of like the best acting, the best story, the best character development, and then second place definitely goes to Dolores as Charlotte Hale.
Mm,
Those two definitely most fleshed out. Most, if anything, I think like Charlotte Hale, Tessa Thompson did a fantastic job this time round.
mm,
For this season, and like every time she's on screen, it really is a fair bit more good
mm,
than anything else. But like other than that, everyone's just kind of like where there's no like proper motivation, right? The plot just kind of like stumbles and limps along as it goes along. I have no idea what Banana and Stubbs were doing half the time, and I don't think they did either. And they just show up in
mm.
places.
They could have been cut out of the season to no ill effect.
Yeah, like very, very honestly, like it really just didn't make sense. The review that the five pearls,
Mm.
who the five pearls were, I
Well, all Dolores.
were all the Loris. Like even then, like that didn't carry kind of any significant weight. Like that revelation didn't add to my emotional investment into any of her copies at all, right? Just because I think like the focus was so much on her Loris that it didn't uh it didn't allow for any of her copies to have that kind of like bandwidth for us to connect with them or to be invested in the fact that they are the same person essentially, right? With the
Yep.
exception of Charlotte Hill.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean like it's a mess, honestly.
Mm,
And like I was just saying, telling you earlier, I had to rewatch the last couple of episodes just because it was so messy, and like I wanted to come on and talk about it, but I rewatched it again. It was just as messy. I just wanted to
mm,
see if like rewatching it, cleared anything up. Was there things that I was missing? Was I not paying attention? Was
mm.
there something deep and meaningful and good in especially the last couple of episodes that I missed out on that would save the season for me, and unfortunately, it didn't.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I mean, on a broad, very like macro scale, I thought the theme was smart. It just wasn't executed properly lah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like even the big Dolores versus Maeve fight, which is sort of like the fucking like they've been building it for 3 seasons, like they've never fought, they've always been on separate paths. It was like fucking like Rock versus Stone Cold. It was like WrestleMania main events,
Yeah.
and but like those fights itself also disappointed. It was a very meh season lah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
It
Um. Yeah. Any concluding thoughts before your rating?
Oh man, I don't know where they're going with this. I think like the fact that we just reviewed devs a while ago, right? And like kind of like the thematic or the subject matter kind of like dovetailing here at this point that we have something to compare it to as well. Very different
Yep.
tonally, very different visually as well. But
Mm,
it felt done. Like
yeah.
it really, really did. And it felt like two very different stories that didn't quite mesh, and frankly I don't know where they're going with this. I really don't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Speaking of done, I give it a 4 out of 10.
it was yeah, I'm gonna give it a 5. I mean, like it's barely past, just because I feel that there were some really standout moments
Mm,
from Tessa Thompson especially,
mm.
that was worth like kind of like sitting through the thing. But outside of that, it's just, yeah, meh is the right word for it.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, let's move on to yet another finale. But this time it's a finale for the DC shared animated movie universe.
Yeah.
There is no real acronym for it, so that's why it's long. It's called Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. It's the 15th and final film in the continuity. And yeah, man, it's a breathtakingly epic conclusion. It is very impressive in size, stakes, and scope, and it even puts something like the in terms of scope and scale, right?
Yeah.
It even puts like Avengers Endgame to shame. And
Oh,
I'm not
definitely.
I'm not saying that it's better than Avengers Endgame, because I put this out on social media the other day, and people were like, "What is better than Avengers Endgame?" I said no. I said it's bigger than Avengers Endgame, which is a very different thing. But anyways, the story centers on a devastated Earth following Superman's failed attempt to stop Darkseid in a catastrophic galactic war. With numerous superheroes annihilated or enslaved, the remaining survivors, both heroes and villains alike, led by John Constantine,
Hmm.
hence the of the Justice League, must band together to take a final stand against Darkseid in order to save the world and all the worlds, the universe. This is kind of a no holds barred post-apocalyptic tale that impressively weaves together threads from Flashpoint, Justice League Dark, Son of Batman. The violence in here is shocking.
Yeah.
Uh, it's quite not PG-13 violence. It's above that. As is the scale of death and destruction.
Hmm.
You want to see Batgirl get eaten by parademons, or actually paradooms, right? They
Yep.
are hybrids of
Yep.
parademons and Doomsday.
Yeah.
You want to see Hawkman get torn apart viciously. You can see it here. They hold nothing back in terms of gore and just jaw-dropping death sequences. But even though the heroes and villains fall left and right, there's still a lot to go around, because this movie features pretty
Everyone.
much every single minor or major DC character you can think of, from Harley Quinn to Swamp Thing to Etrigan. They all get involved to varying extents, but all the characters, of all the characters, I feel like fan favorite Matt Ryan continues to be fantastic in his portrayal of John Constantine
Yep.
in every show that he's in, including Legends, with an excellent emotional arc for this occult detective. And I think he was rightly the star. Surprisingly, actually, the star of this cinematic universe.
Yeah.
What do you
For
think
sure.
about Apocalypse War?
Oh man. I'm just gonna pick up on the goal. I
Mm.
think like what was the first movie in the series? Flashpoint. Was it Flashpoint? Uh.
I'm not sure whether Flashpoint is the first one, but I think it was one of the early ones.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, it's Flashpoint Paradox. For us to have gone from that to
Mm.
this, right?
Yeah.
And with like Young Justice all the way in the mix, kind of the mix and all of that. Like this is dark. Like this is really, really dark. Probably
Mm.
the most gory and most violent than it's ever been.
Yep.
And I think they're just celebrating the fact that we can do this. Because this is our last kind of hurrah before we go out.
Also, it's
And
animated.
and
It's
yeah,
easier to do. Yeah.
yeah, and it's definitely, I wouldn't recommend showing this to any kids for sure.
Yeah.
But um the animated universe for DC has always been standout, and we've always drawn kind of like comparisons to it and the DCEU, and fairly so, right? Because like on a much smaller budget, with much less resources, they've managed to take these beloved kind of characters and this kind of seminal storylines in comic book history and make them into great kind of pieces, right?
Yep.
And I think like Apocalypse War kind of put the capstone on that, right? It's really just everything that we've expected from them for so many years, and just plus some, right?
Mm.
Um, the I do have a little bit of problems in terms of like the pacing and the way that the plot moves forward, just because it's so huge and there's so
Mm.
many kind of characters involved. But I do applaud the fact that they decided largely to focus on Constantine, because
Mm.
his kind of like internal monologue and like his whole introspection as everything is going on around him really does help to lead the audience along in a way that is a bit more kind of like structured amidst all of the things that are going on at the same time. And there's a fair bit going on, right?
Yeah.
Especially for people who have not seen the rest of the kind of like animated movies prior to this. There's
Mm.
a bit of explaining to do. There's a bit of like setup to kind of like and flashback to kind of show people like why they are in the place that they're in currently. And
Mm-hmm.
that in and of itself, I think for most viewers would get pretty confusing. So to have Constantine kind of be the linchpin in all of that really does have a focal point. I mean, Raven is too, but like not quite to the same extent.
Yeah.
And it really it did help for me at least to just have it grounded within like Constantine's point of view.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it does in the end, right? Despite it being a DC movie in the truest sense, because it featured nearly every DC character that I've come to know.
Yeah.
It was still a Justice League Dark movie because Raven and Constantine and Etrigan were sort of like the main characters.
Yeah.
Um, Even Raven's in a battle with her demon father Trigon was sort of like a subplot in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does a fairly good job at climaxing the many threads of the DC animated shared universe with a bittersweet and very epic conclusion. It had a lot of like great uh, team ups, and
Yep.
goosebump inducing moments. This is a film that I think DC fans, even if you haven't followed the movies, a DC fan who knows the broad strokes of these characters, I think should enjoy it as well and
Mm-hmm.
could revel in it. If there is a thing to nitpick, it's that the sheer size of the cast means that not every character arc is served properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest problem with it. Lah.
Yeah. I think. I mean, we kind of faced the same problem with the recent season of Young Justice, right? Where like
Mm,
the cast has expanded so much, but with Young Justice, because you only see episodes like and they are cherry picked across the entire timeline, that kind of you can forgive that, right?
mm,
And it kind of like focuses down on like the really essential parts of the story that move the plot forward for Young Justice. But this being the movie, right, that it is, and it, like so involved, and you don't have time skips, and you don't have like these major. You need to show what's going on, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, it it's I mean it's expected that people will kind of fall by the wayside,
Yep.
and yeah, it just I don't think there's any real way to go about it differently, unfortunately, with when it's such a large ensemble cast of
Mm-hmm.
heroes, major and minor. So I don't know if we can actually fault them for that, right?
Yeah, yeah, I agree lah. It's just a natural thing that happens when you want to do a movie of this scale. It happened with Endgame too. Clearly, not every character can be serviced.
Yep.
So I think just based on the fact that I enjoyed it so much, it's a 7.5 out of 10 for me.
It's a 7 for me. I think it's
Hmm.
a very satisfying conclusion to the animated universe as we know it. I'm not sure if it's going away or if they're
No, it's
just
just it's rebooting.
right. So we're gonna go into what is it now? Rebirth or is it New 52?
Whichever one they choose lah, because the DC does this all the time.
Yeah.
They reboot every few years, and it seems the animated universe does that as well.
Well, so long as the same writers and the same people, the showrunners, kind of like keep to are kept around, I think like we've got more stuff to look forward to.
Yeah, I agree, man. So do check it out if you haven't. It's out now on VOD. You can rent it on iTunes or buy it, on all the different digital platforms where you can, get your VOD, Amazon and things like that, lah. Finally, for the main part of our show, we'll be talking about season 5 of Noel Stevenson's Shira and the Princesses of Power. It's actually the final season
Yep.
of this show. Despite the fact that it only debuted in 2018, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've kind
Yeah,
of gotten like huge. Uh, we got a lot of the seasons, like almost 2 seasons within like 1.5 years, I think. So the gap of it has been very very short between
correct.
seasons.
Yeah. So lay out Shira and the Princess of Power season 5. We both watched it, so we'll give our thoughts in a bit.
Yeah. There's a fair bit to go through, of course. Like, but the long and short of it is that at the end of season 4, Shira basically gives up her power, right? As an act of sacrifice to kind of save her friends. And then the beginning of season 5, we basically see her struggling, to kind of regain her power without the use of a sword, which was shattered in season 4. Uh, this time round, Shira and all her princess friends are bringing the war to the Horde itself, and now with Horde Prime kind of like the main big bad in the series. She still goes about it with the same kind of aplomb and gusto, but without the powers that she's had before. It's kind
Hmm.
of funny, and it's kind of heartwarming to see her struggle and her friends encouraging her as she goes along. But I think the main part of this is that season 5 has been largely one of the most satisfying kind of like payoffs in terms of character investment I think I've seen in
Hmm.
animation for a while, right?
Hmm.
So spoiler alert, I guess. I mean, like, I don't want to go into the kind of the nitty-gritty of the entire plot itself, just because like essentially all of them end up on the Hot Prime ship, right, for various reasons. And in that moment, Shira, Bo, Glimmer, and Ketra are reunited, and that kind of like is the climax of the entire story, and how that plays out over the next couple of episodes is what's really important, and kind of like what we want to get to as far as the review for this goes.
Hmm.
Right. So Ketra's redemption arc is maybe one of the best that I've seen in recent time.
Hmm.
And the fact that Adora and Ketra's kind of like friendship over the course of the last 5 seasons has had this, to call it ups and downs is kind
Yeah.
of doing it an injustice, right? For it
Hmm.
to have played out in the way that it did, and I'm being intentionally vague so that people actually go and watch it if they're interested.
Definitely.
Um,
Yeah. Let's keep it spoiler free, lah,
yeah,
because I know a lot of people don't watch Shira.
yeah, but I mean, since a lot of critics and kind of like TV news outlets have already been talking about like the ending, so I
Mm.
just want to touch a bit more about that and how it fits into this whole realm of like very progressive animated media that has been coming out in the light of like Steven Universe and with Midnight Gospel, Hilda, and so on and so forth, right?
Hmm.
It is a children's cartoon, but the themes that they've been exploring, and just the kind of work that goes into the storytelling here, and obviously Noelle Stevenson, we've been a big fan. We've talked about her a lot. Um,
Mm.
Really, like, I'm pretty blown away. Like
Yeah.
watching season 4, right, with the time skip and all of that. It was a good season, but like, man, season 5 is just like something else. I did not expect it to come to this particular conclusion.
Hmm.
I didn't expect it to be resolved in the way that it did, and for them to be able to pull it off is it's amazing, right? Like, it's nothing short of amazing. And before we kind of like draw kind of comparisons to what happens here, and Legend of Korra hits, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, like, before we get to that, yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of, the show very what it does the best, right, is that it built over several seasons and actually pays it off
Yeah.
like really well. It's something quite rare in final seasons.
Yep.
um it every episode, it feels like a legendary showdown, only to have a bigger event take place in the next episode. So
Yep.
it builds and builds, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It all reminded me of the final season of Steven Universe, as you
Yep.
mentioned. Not Future, but I mean Steven Universe proper.
Yep.
Yeah, and much like that show, like the moral of Shira is still that is still to trust and kindness and love can triumph over adversity. It's just so much harder this time,
Yeah.
and because of that, the pacing of the season kind of runs at a breakneck speed as it burns through plots, and I mean that in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Um, each episode has at least one oh my god epic moment, as the show puts pieces in place needed to end the story,
Yeah.
and every word and moment of the season has a purpose, contributing to this puzzle that fits together in the end.
Yeah.
But even with everything going on, the show still finds time to give all the characters the development they deserve.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say that character work actually drives most of Shira and the Princesses of Power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why Shira has focused so much on Catra,
Yeah.
or at least as much on Catra as he has on Adora. That's
For
because
sure.
the that relationship is kind of the backbone of the series, and this is the season where we get to see exactly what that means.
Yeah.
In spite of everything they've done to each other, Catra and Adora are connected. And it's their time together growing up in the Horde, the trauma they endured then and after, and the ongoing obsession they've had over each other while on opposing sides.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bond that can never be broken, and I think the voice actresses also pull out some fantastic performances,
Yes.
showing how much they've grown with the characters, just as we have. Lah. It's hard to end a series satisfyingly, but Shira accomplishes it here. It's a very powerful, passionate, exciting, emotional, and hilarious season that is very well written, plotted, and it ascribes purpose to every move it makes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. Like, really, for me, it's just how one of the best payoffs, right? Very, very honestly, season 2, season 3, I kind of like dragged myself to watch those 2 seasons, right?
Yeah.
I thought the first season was just like, okay, cool, we've got a remake of Shira, let's check it out. I love Noel Stevenson's work. It was good. It wasn't great.
Mm,
Season 2 was okay. Season 3 was
mm,
eh. Season 4 was good, and it took me by surprise. But for it to ultimately end with the season that we got, right?
mm.
Short of the, I mean, the honestly, the pacing is kind of ridiculous. I don't think I've ever seen a series, an animated series, take that kind of pace.
Yeah.
It's mad and at times like disconcerting, but ultimately like wow, such a satisfying payoff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, um, I we have to acknowledge the fact that I think, Shira is able to do what it does here on the backs of, um, some of the animated series that we totally love, right? Steven Universe, of course, being one.
I
But
think Korra is a big influence also.
yes, Korra for sure. So let's talk a bit about Korra. So the ending of Korra, right? It's a big kind of like a lot of discussion about that. They had to, everyone was waiting for the kiss, and it didn't happen there, and it kind of like they had a they at that time when that premiered, it was understandable why the creators of Legend of Korra could not do what they wanted to, and ultimately shifted the entire relationship between Korra and Asami off
Yep.
to the comic books, which is still doing really, really well and is a great
Mhm,
read that I highly recommend for anybody who's into Avatar and Legend of Korra in
mhm,
general. But I think that despite the fact that they didn't get to put that in, right, that did
mhm,
set the tone and the ground for a lot of these makers that have come after them to really kind of push the boundaries. Of course, we are living in a slightly different time from then,
mhm,
but the kind of like relationship that we get to see, there's a bit more clear here, I think, with uh Adora and Katra, and like Wicklum and Bo, and the truths they have to share with the people that they love, right? Or ultimately come to admit that they love in strange, kind of very weird and complex ways for a children's, what's supposed to be a children's cartoon,
mhm,
is is really a testament, I think, to how far the genre of like just animated series in general have been allowed to grow and to
yep.
push boundaries.
Yep.
So I really wish we could have gotten the Korra ending that everybody wanted, right? Not
Mhm.
everybody, most of us at
Sure.
least, the
Mhm,
reasonable ones of us at least. But for Shira to be able to show relationships, right, both queer and non-queer,
mhm,
and complex, in the way that they have here in season 5, I'm hoping that's something that future creators will continue to pursue, right? In
Hmm.
as long as it's part of the the story that they're trying to tell, and feel
Yeah.
bold enough to be able to do that, because something that got written off by a lot of people as just a remake of a kind of like
Hmm.
strange very sexist kind of cartoon and a
Hmm.
spin-off of He-Man, essentially, has been flipped on its head
Hmm.
to such a degree, and a very very impactful way. So I'm hoping that people can build on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Let's not forget that Shira and the Princesses of Power started out at a disadvantage. The series faced backlash for not conforming to what fans of the original 1980s cartoon thought the reboot should be.
Yeah,
Let's not forget how mad some of the quote unquote fans got over the fact that Shira wore shorts, stupid things like that.
yeah,
Um, Looking back, it all seems so pointless. Over the past 5 seasons, Shira has grown beyond its source material and created something special that the cast and crew should be proud of. It's built on the legacy of shows like Steven Universe and Legend of Korra, as you mentioned,
yeah,
and perhaps kind of exceeding Korra to become a series whose impact will be felt in animation for years to come.
yeah,
And I do want to credit Adventure Time as well,
yeah,
because a lot of people seem to forget that without Adventure Time there can be no Steven Universe, and it dealt with a lot of the same themes as well.
yeah.
So
Agreed.
um, yeah, it's kind of a golden age for children's animation, and Shira is just another in a long line of really really great kids shows lah.
Hmm.
I would give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Wow. Okay. Yes. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. So both
Hmm.
highly, highly recommended. If anybody is curious and wants to like start from the beginning, I'm just gonna say season 2 and season 3 aren't great. They
Yeah,
kind of like pad along. You could go and like just read up on the episodes and skip straight to season 4 if you want, because there's a time skip anyway. But
yeah.
I do think season 1 is important. So you can watch season 1. You can skip 2 and 3 and do the time skip together with the series.
Hmm.
And season 4, very good. Season 5, excellent, and we highly recommend it.
100%. Yeah. I mean, this year has had a ton of great series finales. We just talked about the Clone Wars.
Yep.
We have talked about The Good Place and BoJack Horseman. So lots of great shows really ending on a high this year.
Yeah.
So I mean, good job. It used to be such a rare thing for great finales, right?
Yep.
Um, but everyone seems to have been nailing it this year. So kudos. And next up, we're moving on to a little segment that we call quick hits. That's where I very quickly review some of the new shows or movies that have been out recently that my co-host hasn't been able to see yet lah.
Yep.
First up, I'll be talking about Upload, which is the latest comedy from Greg Daniels, who is a bit of a TV comedy legend.
Hmm.
He was the showrunner of The Simpsons from seasons 3 to 10, which was, as we all know, prime Simpsons.
Yeah.
Where the Simpsons made their reputation, like seasons 3 to 10. He created King of the Hill. He created the US version of The Office. He co-created Parks and Recreation with Mike Schur. And we talk a lot about Mike Schur, but Greg Daniels was literally Mike Schur's mentor.
Hmm.
And his new show is weirdly similar to one of Mike Schur's shows as well. It's a sci-fi satire comedy set in 2033 that follows an app developer named Nathan who is uploaded into a virtual afterlife following a car accident.
Yeah.
So, afterlife stories on TV are pretty hot these days, ranging from, as we mentioned, Mike Schur's show The Good Place, which focused on moral philosophy, to the exploration of domestic ennui in Forever, or even Black Mirror's best episode, San Junipero. So, what makes Upload different? Well, for one thing, the show is about capitalism, just in general. You see, the digital reality is neither paradise nor damnation,
Yep.
because your wealth on Earth determines how idyllic your hereafter can be. The service is really just a means for companies to keep profiting from your consciousness as you continue making purchases long after death.
Hmm.
The afterlife is just an app with pop-up ads and different subscription tiers. You are programmed with all your earthly urges, so you need to eat, you need to shit, you need to wear clothes, you got to buy food, and if you want all these clothes, you got to buy it. There is lag time when the system is stressed, so it's kind of far from ideal. It stars Robbie Amell, who is the brother of Arrow, Stephen Amell,
Yeah.
who is effortlessly charming in the lead role as Nathan, and it takes a couple of episodes for Nathan to become really fleshed out, but the show gets there, and he's someone to root for, even if he's really, really ridiculously good looking, and more than a little narcissistic. Nathan is assisted by a quote unquote angel, which is just the services term for a customer service rep. Her name is Nora. She works in the real world, of course, and she enters the reality via VR.
Yeah.
The two strike up a genuine friendship that maybe will blossom into a romance. It's a very Jim and Pam dynamic, if you've seen The Office.
Mm-hmm.
And that relationship is kind of the thing that really hooks you into the show emotionally. And all the while, a mystery is bubbling over the circumstances of Nathan's death. Nathan, as it turns out, was developing a free app that could let anyone customize the afterlife for free, which is threatens,
Mm-hmm.
this billion-dollar afterlife industry. So was he murdered? That's the mystery element. On the outside, Nathan can still make Skype calls to his wealthy girlfriend Ingrid,
Yeah.
who is the one paying for his luxurious afterlife in a resort called Lakeview. Unfortunately, not many people can afford something like this. Even Nathan can't afford this, so he winds up a prisoner to the whims of his sponsor Ingrid, who he slowly comes to realize is just this vapid influencer type person. He's forced to please her and cater to her every whim because she could literally withhold money or even delete him completely. Um, the world building here is quite top notch from the get go, and its characters are beautifully nuanced and well written. It has some very sharp points to make about capitalism, income inequality, and data privacy.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, the accumulation of consumers' personal data will always be used to exploit us and make corporations richer, which is what Upload explores. This is basically capitalism never ending
Yeah.
into your afterlife. But most importantly, for a comedy, it is extremely funny, which is no surprise coming from Greg Daniels. In its very first few minutes, like, I mean, I laughed out loud because Nathan is teaching his niece classical music,
Uh-huh.
which in the future is like a G6, and and that already made me crack up so hard, and it gets funnier every episode, and the world and characters become very well fleshed out. The only downside is that the setting and premise feels a little familiar. The afterlife, there have been dozens of versions of afterlife stories exploring the human condition in recent years, so this doesn't feel quite as fresh. Which is no knock on Craig Daniels because, like, get this, he actually wrote the entire series in 2008.
Yeah.
Um, like more than 10 years ago, that was 12 years ago, before all these other shows came around, before The Good Place, before San Junipero, he's been shopping the pilot episode around for 12 years until Amazon Prime finally bought it last year. And Upload is I think, kind of a victim of unfortunate timing, because I feel like if this came out in 2008,
Mm-hmm.
10 or 12 years ago, it would be considered like a really visionary show. Right now, it's just another in a long line of excellent afterlife TV shows,
Yeah.
but it's just not like special. It's still super highly recommended though. It's 9 out of 10 for me.
Nice. Nice. Okay. I'm definitely gonna check that out. That definitely sounds interesting. I'm just so that I can see I like a G6 as classical music, I think, if nothing else.
Yeah, that was like in the very first few minutes. I also recommend that you read an interview with Greg Daniels and Mike Schur on Mashable. I think they both detail a dinner that they had in 2016
Uh-huh.
where they were both discussing what they were working on right now, because they hadn't seen each other since Parks and Rec's finish.
Right. Okay.
So one of those, like, what have you been up to since we last saw each other, etc. So they both exchanged the pilot scripts for Upload and The Good Place.
Yeah.
And like 5 pages in, they were both like, "Oh fuck, this is the same show." Um, Ultimately, they both realized that outside of the afterlife setting, like, the shows are actually quite different. Because one is the actual afterlife, this is kind of a VR afterlife,
Yeah.
and one's about moral philosophy, one's about capitalism. But they both actually independently came up with this afterlife thing. Mike Schur and Greg Daniels each, this is no joke, right? Like, they had both in their pilot scripts had a no swearing running gag.
Yeah. Mhm.
Like Fork for The Good Place, if you've ever seen.
Yeah.
So Greg actually decided to take that part out of his show because Mike had already sold his show to NBC, and Greg was
Right.
still like shopping his script around. So it's kind of insane how they both came up with
Yeah.
like similar running gags and similar shows.
Oh, well, I mean, like I'm glad that they didn't decide that, neither one of the shows didn't get to be made. Like it's sounding like we all love Good Place, right?
Yep.
But if it's good to see that he continued to pursue it anyway, despite having that dinner.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm definitely going to check that out as well as the interview. Uh, for that.
Dope. The second best show that I've seen this month
Uh-huh.
is a new show called Solar Opposites. It is the newest animated comedy from Rick and Morty co-creator Justin Roiland. Right off the bat, it's fantastic. It's a much looser, lighter, more humane Rick and Morty, and it shares a lot of the sitcom DNA of Third Rock from the Sun, though. So it's more similar to Third Rock from the Sun
Yeah.
than Rick and Morty. The premise centers around a family of aliens from a dying world who are forced to take refuge in Middle America. Half of the family feel that the planet is awful. The other half feel that it's awesome. There's the adult parental units. There is an uptight and insecure scientist named Corvo. The other one is a carefree and lazy person called Terry. The kids are made up of an ill-tempered teen
Yeah.
named Yamulak and his sweetly upbeat sibling Jesse. Their personality clashes kind of serve as the launchpad for most of the episode conflicts, but these folks seem to genuinely care for one another in a fairly straightforward way, which is already sets it apart from Rick and Morty, right?
Yeah.
Add to that, like the one-off nature of many of these stories, you've got a series that feels much more like a traditional sitcom in tone and tenor. Um, However, that's kind of like grading on a curve. Solar Opposites gets plenty weird and absurd and ludicrously creative in its constructions and narrative conceits, as though Royland were given a sitcom structure and allowed free reign within those confines.
Okay.
It's wild, much like Rick and Morty is. It's filled with pop culture references and it loves to deconstruct genre tropes, just like Rick and Morty. But like the key difference is that it also has a lot more heart. Like Rick and Morty is a very nihilistic and cynical show.
Yeah.
This one is a bit more warm and fuzzy and kind. The result is kind of a looser, flightier show, breezier.
Huh.
As a consequence of that approach, it takes most of the season to kind of get a firm sense of who these characters are,
R-
with major personality traits still getting introduced, and explored in later seasons, lah.
mhm.
And but like after the 8 installments, the season feels like it comes to a perfect close, and you get to know everyone really, really well. The humor is reliably strong. Like it's so good. It's actually much funnier than Rick and Morty is.
Wow.
In terms of just pure LOL, lah. Because Rick and Morty is more of like chuckle, chuckle, clever,
Yeah.
chuckle, chuckle, clever. This one is just like really like breakout LOL kind of moments, lah.
Uh-huh.
The pacing is also very breakneck as he races from one plot to the other. It's hard not to be won over by this kind of avalanche of charm that is coming at you. The look of the show is the same as Rick and Morty. It contains all the hallmarks of Roiland's cartooning style.
Yeah.
But once you get to know the aliens, it's again like it's you want to compare it to Rick and Morty, but it's actually quite different. For example, in the opening moments, I thought Corvo seems like he's going to be a variant of Rick Sanchez.
Mhm.
This exasperated egomaniacal genius. But it becomes apparent very, very soon that Corvo is a far more relatable, everyday sort,
Yeah.
smart but not overly so. Often irritating the others with his coding and obsession with work, but he's also quick to be hurt by a thoughtless act or rude comments. And he and Terry's odd couple routine is kind of based in genuine affection
Yeah.
and need for warmth and companionship. Plus, their cluelessness over basic human society. It gets played for broad laughs, a la Third Rock from the Sun. But there is a warmth and familiarity here that isn't present in the sometimes overly clever, overly nihilistic Rick and Morty.
Mhm.
One of my favorite aspects of the show is a subplot that follows the male teen alien, Yamulak. He has a habit of shrinking any human who annoys him and storing them in the terrarium in his room. Over the course of the show, we get to see small glimpses of humans being put in there, and then we get to see the dystopian society develop in miniature over the course of the season. You see a dictator rise to power, and you see lower classes forming a rebellion. It all builds into a penultimate episode that's just set entirely in the terrarium, following resistance fighters trying to overthrow their despotic leader, and it's actually genuinely like one of the best like
Mm.
dystopian rebellion, let's fight against the dictator kind of it's almost movie like, and I would honestly watch an entire show just about the little humans and their new society. And that's just a very, very literal and metaphorically tiny part of Solar Opposites. All in all, it's a very winningly small scale standalone episodic charmer. It burns through plot at a voracious pace. Each installment can be enjoyed on its own merits. It's fresh and funny, and absurd in its willingness to go to goofy places in search of a laugh. The series isn't trying to reinvent the sitcom wheel.
Mhm.
It just wants to be a good-natured exercise in warm, witty comedy. It's an 8 out of 10 for me.
Oh, nice. Wow. Some very high scoring stuff so far.
Yeah. I mean, I kicked it off like high up with the best of of the month.
Yeah.
So those were the top notch stuff. I'm gonna dive into something a bit more in the middle, but things I still like. Next
Okay.
up, I'm going to be talking about Bit. Bit is a low budget vampire movie with a kind of a robust feminist twist on the Lost Boys. The vampires of Bit have one rule over any other: no turning boys. You can eat them, you can leave them drained, but under no circumstances do you make them a vampire, because history has proven over and over again that they cannot be trusted with power.
Mm-hmm.
We follow a transgender teenage girl named Laurel, who is played by Supergirl's Nicole Main in a terrific performance. She is on summer vacation in LA. She accidentally falls in with this nest of queer feminist vampires who seek to rid the world of predatory men. The film chiefly utilizes traditional vampiric mythology, but proceeds forward like a feminist revenge fantasy. It's also refreshing to see queer women as horror protagonists, not victims.
Yeah.
Uh, while the scenes that try to create a sense of magic and wonder kind of fall flat a bit, the fight scenes are actually very well done and quite effective.
Huh.
The drama develops between the young woman is something that I think many viewers can relate to, regardless of gender. Overall, a very solid vampire movie and a breath of fresh air for the genre. It's a 7 out of 10.
Wow. Okay.
Nothing special, but pretty good.
Yeah.
Next up, I'm going to be talking very quickly about Butt Boy. Yeah, it's BUTTBOY. It's called Butt Boy. It follows. It's a movie on VOD. It follows a character named Chip, played by writer director Tyler Cormack, who is a man who is miserable with his life. He has a soulless job that he hates, a loveless marriage that he's tired of, and even though he's a new father, he feels unfulfilled in every way. Then he gets an appointment for his first prostate exam. That's when he realizes that he not only loves the feeling of having foreign objects in his butt, he desperately craves it. At first, Chip tries to get his wife in on this new fetish, but she turns him down. So he moves to everyday household objects. The craving slowly grows into an addiction, and Chip doesn't find board game pieces or even the TV remote enough. So he moves on to bigger and better things until one day he goes too far. So at first we don't know what too far means. That's when we meet grizzled detective Russell Fox. He looks like every other police detective in every movie you've seen. The slick back hair, the long trench coat, the drinking problem. Fox is so stereotypical that the other detectives even call him out on this. It's obviously played for laughs. Fox is involved in a missing persons case involving several children.
Mm.
When he learns about Chip's ability, he puts the pieces together and realizes that these kids have been disappearing up Chip's butt. So begins a very bizarre cat and mouse game I've seen in years. The most bizarre thing, because this is literally a man with a superpower to stick anything up his butt, including small children. Keep in mind that they are not dead; they're living in his rectum. I'll get to that later. What makes Bug Boy fascinating is how seriously it approaches this concept. It's a hilarious and disturbing film, but instead of a straight comedy, right, it treats the story with a seriousness of a David Fincher thriller about a hardened detective on the hunt for a demented serial killer. Like, sure, yeah, there are some comedic moments that will make you laugh out loud, but it keeps a serious, super serious tone that sells the gravitas, of the story, despite the ludicrous subject matter. Without saying much, because you really should see this movie without knowing about where it goes, but Boy defies its limited budget and presents some truly disturbing yet impressive visuals. But before it gets there, Comics' debut feature uses a slow pace to distract the audience
Mm-hmm.
and give them no indication of how wild and how far they'll take the concept.
Yeah.
Like it's like you're watching Seven, but the criminal is a guy who stuffs things up
His
his
butt.
butt. Yeah. When the film reaches its holy shit third act, which takes place entirely up Chip's ass, I could not believe what I was watching because the entire third act is just up his ass. I was engrossed and invested in the story, and I completely believed everything that was happening belonged with the rest of the movie. But boy, is very very entertaining and weird, and it's not high art. It's kind of flawed. It's not even that good, but the premise is so wild that I think you should watch it anyway. It's a 6 out of 10. So 6 out of 10, solid recommend. You should watch it if you have time, or if you're high or something. Just go give it a shot.
Yeah, sounds good.
Very quickly, I'm gonna be talking about Sea Fever. It's written and directed by Niesa Hardiman. No relation to our former co-host. This Irish indie sci-fi horror is a bit like Alien on the ocean, featuring a group of people on a ship who
Huh.
begin to be picked off by a mysterious aquatic monster. It's not like the other one that takes place under the ocean. This one's on a boat. It's led by a really good performance by someone called Hermione Caulfield, who plays Siobhan, a marine biology student who joins a family fishing boat to do research for a doctorate. When out in the deep Atlantic, an unknown life form ensnares the boat.
Mhm.
This engaging thriller makes great use of its setting to create this palpable sense of claustrophobia. And as I mentioned, its lead character is very watchable. She's shy and introverted and not as strong as like Ripley was in Alien, but she's very smart, and you get the sense that she can outwit whatever dangers come her way. Sea Fever keeps the audience engaged from frame one, but does suffer from a lack of momentum and originality. You'll like Sea Fever; it's well made and entertaining to watch, but very little of it sticks with you.
Mhm.
Caulfield's performance does, as does the setting, the claustrophobic setting. But beyond that, it feels like a movie you've seen before. It's just you feel like you've seen a million of this, but this is like one of the better executed ones. It's a 6.5 out of 10 for me.
Oh wow. Okay.
Couple last ones before we move on. I'm going to be talking about Porno. Porno. It's not a porn movie. It's a horror movie that takes place in an old school movie theater circa 1992.
Mhm.
Excuse me, Porno follows five super religious teens who work at a local movie theater in a small Christian town. One slow night, they discover a mysterious old film hidden in the basement. To us, it looks like a 1970s erotic movie, but to them, being good Christian youths in a pre-internet age, they have no idea what it's supposed to be. They don't know the difference between a dirty movie or an arty one.
Mhm.
Of course, playing the movie unleashes the on-screen succubus, who then preys on each person's desire to steal their souls. As far as B-grade horror flicks go, Porno has a terrific, if over-the-top references to 80s and 90s teen movies. It pays homage to horror porn, which is kind of a lost genre.
Mhm.
Some of the gags are amazing, such as witnessing one of the teens' testicles explode. But unfortunately, the humor is a bit uneven. There are
Okay.
more misses than hits, actually,
Right.
which really drags down an otherwise fun premise. So it's a 4.5 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the premise, just
Mm.
some of the jokes like don't work. Finally, I want to talk about The Ratchet. The Ratchet is a new super low budget indie horror film, and surprisingly has become a hit on VOD, where it's remained number one in the US for the last 3 weeks on all platforms. The movie follows a defiant teenage boy struggling with his parents' imminent divorce, who ends up fighting an old witch who has possessed the next door neighbor. It's a kind of a no frills, back to basics kind of horror, something you might find in the 80s and 90s as the direct to VHS release. It breaks no molds. There's a certain retro charm to its style and aesthetic, right down to the cheap practical effects.
Mhm.
It's pretty much boilerplate, but it is successful in its modest ambition. It's the kind of movie that you used to kind of blindly rent on Video Easy on a Friday night.
Uh,
You see a creepy witch on the cover, and then the movie delivers the creepy witch, and it's just that. It's a solid film. 6 out of 10 for me, and that's it for this month's quick hits. Anything like particularly stood out to you or that you wanted to
I
watch?
mean, I'm definitely gonna check out Upload. I'll say Butt Boy for like for when I have time.
For giggles, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for shits and giggles, no pun intended.
Mhm.
But yeah, we'll find some time in our watching schedule to go and kind of do that. But definitely those two. Bit sounds interesting. But I mean, we'll see if I'll check that out. Yeah.
Yeah, actually recommend Solar Opposites over Bit, but yeah, both are worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, Solar Opposites, I've already kind of started already. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So, I totally agree with you. So if we just jump back for a bit, like, Solar
Mhm.
Opposites is a very different animal from Rick and Morty.
Yep.
It looks familiar and it looks the same, but it feels so different, and I'm really enjoying it. I have to say.
Yeah, I mean it's just because that's Justin Roiland's cartooning style.
Yeah.
That's why, and because he has aliens and sci-fi, it gets the comparison, but it's actually a very different show.
Mm.
Yeah, and next up we'll be jumping into Ice's anime corner, where we'll be highlighting the best shows from this current season of anime. So what do you have up your sleeve, Isa?
Okay. So for this season, what are we now? Spring 2020. I'm a bit disappointed. I think a lot of the series I'm going to talk about are returning franchises
Okay.
that are coming back. So I'll talk about those first and get them out of the way before I have two recommendations this time around. First I'm going to talk about our favorite kind of like anime food porn show, which is
Mm-hmm.
Shokugeki no Soma. The fifth plate is out this time round. Soma and his friends are in a very, very different place in the world. Soma is now part of the Elite 10. Everything's been shaken out. Erina is now the director of the school, and we kind of embark on their adventures in this new kind of position in life. And now they are in their second year of their course in culinary school.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is the introduction of a mysterious chef that beats Joichiro. And apparently he is setting his sights on Soma at some point in time. So we don't they haven't revealed who that is yet. Exactly. There have been a couple of hints, but nobody knows for sure. As far as the anime goes, anyway. If you're reading the manga, then please save your friends the grief and don't spoil it for them. Yeah, but so far we're a couple episodes in, it's all the same things that we've come to know and love about that. We've got like over the top like food reactions. We've got some amazing kind of like um depictions of food and the recipes that they're doing, and kind of like the really in-depth research that I've come to really enjoy from a show like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of the same, and from what I understand, that this arc is going to be pretty fascinating, especially in the tail end of it. So I'm looking forward to see what that's going to be about. I'm just going to give it a 7.5 based off the 4 episodes that I've seen so far. And if you love the rest of the seasons, then this is more food for you, more food for your plate.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's a fifth plate, right? Season five.
Yep, season 5. That's right. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm also gonna talk about. I don't know if I've recommended the first season of this. I think I might have mentioned it before, as
Mm-hmm.
a normal. But Kaguya-sama Love Is War season 2 is currently out, and it's also currently out on Netflix for those of you that aren't into going to look for your anime. And again, we are exploring the student council of a high school and the strange love antics and machinations between their student council president and her vice president and his vice president. I think I covered a bit of it before. In season 2, it's more of the same, but I think some of the jokes are getting a bit more complex because you need to have watched season 1 to kind of understand. They're kind of building on themselves again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really, really, really funny. And if anybody hasn't checked it out, it's a bit of like school slice of life comedy that
Community-esque, would you say?
pretty close. Like I started on Kaguya-sama because it reminds me of this much older anime called Seto Kaicho,
Mm.
which was also about a student council, and it just had the most bizarre. That one was really very community. I think Kaguya-sama Love Is War is on the same kind of path.
Mm.
And it's always enjoyable for some strange reason. If I need something like just to kind of like laugh about, there's nothing really much to think about, but it's cute, it's heartwarming, and it's really funny.
Yeah.
So that's on Netflix right now if you guys want to check that out. It's really good. I'm gonna give it a 7.5 for me for season
Nice.
2. I believe I gave season 1 a 7. So
Yep.
that's gonna be it. Fruits Basket, the remake has is going to season 2, and a year has passed since Toru Honda and has started living with the Soma family in the residence. For those of you who have watched the original Fruit Baskets, and I've already covered this for season 1, the original Fruit Basket is a cult hit, but there were a lot of things that were lacking in terms of like very poor animation and a lot of
Uh-huh.
very sloppy kind of like shortcuts that the animation studio took.
Definitely agree.
The
Yeah.
remake, however, is totally different, right? Season 1 gave us some fantastic animation, some gorgeous animation, if I should say so myself, and some really, really good music as well to go with that, to accompany this very um, charming, if somewhat dark, story about a girl who stumbles upon a family with magical powers.
Mm-hmm.
where the boys all turn into different animals when they are touched. Yeah. So season two is more of the same, and we're continuing the story with that. For those of you that got into season one or haven't gotten into season one, please stick with season two. There are going to be a lot of reviews here if you haven't watched the original Fruit Basket. And the creators have been saying that they are going to be a bit more true to the manga itself. So we'll get to see things play out as those of us who have read the manga will want to see, as opposed to how it ended up in the original kind of iteration of it. So that's Fruit
Mm-hmm.
Basket season two. I'm giving it it's a good 6.5 out of 10. It's enjoyable, and if you like the franchise, then it's been good. Now,
Yep.
we still have all the other things going on. There's what is it? Railgun is still going on. If you guys are still
Mm-hmm.
keen for that, Black Clover is still going on. If you guys are still keen on that, but I'm gonna move on to my two recommendations for a new anime that's come this round. First of all, I'm going to start out with Tower of God. That might sound familiar. You've been listening to us for a while because we've talked about it a couple of times, both here on Genre Equality as well as
On Behold.
on Behold,
Yeah.
right? Because we
Yeah.
were we were talking
Solo
about
leveling.
solo leveling.
Manhwas.
Yeah, manhwas in general. So Tower of God is kind of like
Yeah.
a, at this point, almost a legendary Korean manhwa, right? And it recently got picked up by Tencent, I believe, and got
Mm-hmm.
made into the anime. So I was really curious to see how this. For those of you that don't know, Tower of God is a massive, massive read. There's like several hundred episodes. I mean, it could rival One Piece as far as the number of chapters that are available for the main story itself, right? The
Mm-hmm.
problem with reading the manhwa is that the pacing is a bit poor. And it's being the fact that there's just so much to consume, like it hardly ever gets to the point. I do feel that the anime has solved some of those problems. Like just in general, like having movement and the fight scenes and the music and all of that really does help with the way that the plot kind of moves forward. So we're a couple of episodes in. I'm really enjoying it. The artwork is very true to the original art style, but it adds more, right? Like just like the lighting and the way some of the creative decisions that they've chosen to make really does add quite a fair bit of value here. Of course, Tencent has plenty of money to throw at this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we're a couple of episodes in. I'm really enjoying it as far as it goes, just because I was a big fan of the manhwa. Well, at least up to the point that I made it, which was maybe 300, I think.
Okay.
And I didn't really manage to read anything past that, but it's been very promising so far. I'm really interested to see where it goes from here because there's a ton of material for them to kind of chew through. If they go at the
Mm.
pacing that the first four episodes have so far, I think we're in a pretty good place to have a very long running anime series that
Nice.
promises to deliver some really really good inventive kind of like fantasy ideas. So
Mm-hmm.
Tower of God, I really like it. I'm gonna give what I have so far an 8. We'll see if it manages to live up to that in the coming episodes itself. And
Okay.
finally, I'm going to talk about Wave. Listen to me, which is honestly my favorite of this season. And for this is going to appeal to a very specific kind of demographic. So basically, Minari Koda is a restaurant worker who has recently gone through a really bad breakup, and while she's heartbroken, she goes out at night, gets drunk, and rants about her misery to a complete stranger
Oh,
who
like a
happens to be
therapist or just like
no, a
a stranger?
complete stranger at a bar, and who happens to be a radio station director
Oh.
in Sapporo, Hokkaido, where the entire story kind of takes place. Right.
Mm.
The next day, Minari is shocked to hear recording of her rant of herself from the previous night playing over local radio, right?
Wow.
When she finds out about it, she rushes over to the radio station in a frenzy to kind of stop the broadcast, and as she confronts Mato, who's the director of the radio station, it sets off like a chain of a series of events that leads to her ending up giving a very kind of improv talk live on air to
Mm.
explain her rant from the day before.
Yep.
Uh, and because of just her demeanor and her voice and all of that, Mato, the director, recognizes her as a kind of like raw talent. So Minari ends up becoming a late night talk show host.
Oh
under his
wow.
direction, right?
Yeah.
And basically, she covers kind of like amusing narratives and stories from her life and other people's lives that are set in Sapporo, all the while balancing her balancing her daytime job as a restaurant worker and her personal life. To kind of, I mean, this is a lovely, funny slice of life, adult
Mhm.
working comedy, that is very kind of reminiscent of Working.
Yeah.
If you guys have ever seen that, it's not by the same author though, but I love it. It's so good. It's so funny, and I think like there are a lot of touch points with just the whole like genre of radio with us being podcasters as well.
Mhm.
That really really appeal to me. But the music choice is fantastic. Their use of music is so apt and so precise for a series that has to do with radio talk shows itself. I'm really enjoying this, and it's my favorite so far. And usually, slice of life stuff doesn't really come out on top in any particular season.
Mm.
But yeah, Wave Listen to Me is really a solid pick. I've enjoyed the episode so far, and it's a 8 out of 10 for me, as it stands right now.
Where could one find it?
I think it is on Crunchyroll, if I believe so.
Okay. Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
It sort of reminds me a bit of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, in a sense that this lady goes up to rant about something and then finds a new career in it,
right.
and then it kind of relates her life frustrations and observations into this whole new career.
Yeah,
It's very
it
interesting.
does bear semblance to that. It really, some of the beats feel the same. I'll have to say.
Hmm.
Anyways, it's on Funimation, not on Crunchyroll.
Nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
for those of you who don't know where to find your anime. Yeah, so
Hmm.
that wraps up Anime Corner for this week. There were a couple of others that kind of started off really great, and then as we kind of hit, usually I give it 3 episodes, but just because like the way the season, when the season started, it was beginning of April,
Hmm.
and now like we're at what, end of May already, so I managed to catch a bit more than that, and some of them dropped off after the third episode, and I didn't want to recommend those. But yeah, that's it for me from Anime Corner. We will be picking that up again when the summer season picks up, which is usually traditionally the best season. And we'll talk more about anime then.
Nice. Finally, before we jump into the big DC news, for the pull list this month, I wouldn't be recommending a title specifically, but I will be recommending a digital service. Shonen Jump Weekly. Digital comics have kind of been a big part of the comics industry for years at this point, right?
Yep.
Yet somehow it feels like when it comes to the big publishers, subscription access to their biggest hits is kind of weirdly compromised on the DC side. It's tied into DC Universe, which is great unless you just want comics. On the Marvel side, Unlimited's restriction primarily skewed towards its back catalog rather than current issues.
Yep.
So for weekly Shonen Jump app, which is currently available in Singapore if you live here, but also in the US, Canada, the UK, Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, the Philippines, and India, it is frankly it knocks the majority of current digital subscription services on their asses, at least in terms of comics.
Mm-hmm.
For free, right? You get access to the company's weekly chapter releases of its current ongoing manga, translated and simultaneously launched in line with their debuts in Japan, which is ideal if you're already caught up with a bunch of the bigger series.
Mm-hmm.
The real deal, especially if you want to start exploring Jump's array of action adventure manga and what they have to offer, is you only have to pay $2 a month. It gets you access to this humongous vault of prior chapters on top of the newer ones, which are available for free. Keep in mind, free. There's thousands of chapters available across an equally ridiculous amount of series. It's almost too much to read for such a low price point.
Yeah.
Whether you're an anime fan who wants to read the source material for some of your favorite shows, or a comics curious newbie looking to expand to manga beyond your normal Western comics, or just someone who would like to read something really, 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 really long right now because you're stuck at home. Um, this is like an app that you really should be trying because I've never seen something with such a cheap price point with so much to offer. It's really an incredible app.
Yeah. So just to let the people listening know, what are you currently reading on the app right now?
Oh man, like I'm getting into anime. I'm getting into the manga sources for my favorite animes,
Nice, nice.
particularly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because like I've never read My Hero Academia, for example. So I've been going back and reading My Hero Academia and a spin-off work, My Hero Academia Vigilantes, to
Yes,
see
yes.
how different it is. Speaking of
Vigilante is
food
great.
war, yes, yeah. Speaking of food wars, I've been reading that too. I've been reading Haikyuu. And weirdly enough, actually, I've not seen the anime for Haikyuu, but I do want to now.
Yeah.
One Piece seems a bit too long,
Oh,
but I'm
uh,
trying it.
it's
Demon Slayer.
daunting. It really, really is.
Yes.
Yes, the Demon Slayer
Demon
manga.
Slayer. Yes, I got into that. If you listen to Behold recently, I jumped into the Demon Slayer manga after I watched the entire series, well, at least the entire first season of Demon Slayer on Netflix.
Yeah.
Literally all of Dragon Ball is on there. I don't know whether I want to try or not, but it's a lot lah.
Oh man, I've been keeping tabs here and there on like what's happening on the Dragon Ball universe, and I'm just like, I'm not sure, man. I
Mhm.
really,
Yeah.
seminal piece of work
Yep.
from our childhood.
Hmm.
Had a great run, especially with Dragon Ball Z. I can't even. Oh man, I can't remember what the current series is, but I can't. I tried. I tried. So I don't
Yeah.
think I will be revisiting anytime soon.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, those are some great stuff to kind of be looking at. Shonen Jump is a very important platform for manga and anime artists over the years, and it's great to see that they've branched into the digital age with a platform that is honestly really easy to use, right?
Yeah. I
And like
mean,
really
I
high quality as
100%
well.
agree.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So for
Yeah.
$2 a month, guys, good shonen manga, well, manga in general, up to date, official translations. Go
Hmm.
get it if that's your thing.
Keep in mind, if you're already caught up, you can get on the app for free and just read the new issues. Like it's almost unreal how much they're giving away here. It's an amazing app, man.
Yeah, totally.
Yep. Finally, we'll be delving into uh, some DC specific news.
Yeah.
First, let's talk about the decision by HBO Max to release the quote unquote Snyder Cuts. We don't even need to refer to what movie it is, but if you are living under a rock, it refers to Justice League. As you know, back in it feels like 100 years ago now, when Justice League was released, Zack Snyder fell out and of filming, stopped production because his daughter passed away.
Mm-hmm.
The reins were handed over to Joss Whedon, who sort of had to Frankenstein together a new Justice League movie in a very short span of time. The movie didn't do very well. It didn't showcase Whedon at his best. It didn't showcase Snyder at his
Nope.
best. And it was probably kind of held up as like the point where the DCEU died because it was such a flop
Yeah.
theatrically at the box office. But there's been this rising, I want to call it movement that's been happening,
Yeah.
rallied by the hashtag release the Snyder Cut, that has called, agitated, petitioned. They even bought a Times Square billboard ad and chartered a plane to fly a banner over Comic Con for Snyder's version to be released. And on the film's second anniversary, the hashtag had its biggest day ever with the movie stars Gal Gadot and Ben Affleck adding their voices on Twitter. And now, a year after that,
Yeah.
HBO Max are relenting. They're going to be releasing the Snyder Cut of the Justice League movie with $30 million added in terms to finish up the shots that were never finished, maybe for some reshoots, who knows.
Yeah.
It's planned for a 4-hour director's cut or 6 TV style chapters that they'll be releasing it in, like so 6 45-minute episodes, so to speak, on HBO Max lah, and it'll be debuting in 2021. What do you think about this news?
Just to be clear, right? For
Yep.
those of you who are listening that don't know, a Snyder Cut actually doesn't exist,
Mm-hmm.
right? What they're doing right now, I won't say it's unprecedented, but it is dangerous. I think.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like recently we talked about, the movie industry and just how they were just cutting out, um, you going direct to consumers, right, with straight to digital streaming services
Yep.
and how that will cut out cinemas. So again, we're kind of embroiled the whole fact. The main reason the Snyder Cut is interesting is because it's basically the cut didn't exist. Snyder left the film before he actually got anywhere close to a final cut. The 4 hour cut that people are referring to isn't anywhere close to the final cut. It was a rough cut that he was supposed to deliver to
Mm.
the studio for vetting, right?
No VFX or
Yeah, so there
anything.
was
Yeah.
no VFX. There's no, and I mean, like, it was barely a film to begin with. It was just basically an assembly of cuts that he would like to use, right? And that's as far
Mm-hmm.
as he got. What this $30 million going into this actually means is that from here on in, if they set the precedence for this, and they are, whenever a director or a more likely a studio is unhappy with the way a supposed box office hit is supposed to go, they might pull this
Mm-hmm.
again. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know exactly what that means in the long term for the movie industry. I honestly don't care. I
Mm.
don't think that there's enough for Snyder to salvage, in my personal opinion. I do
Mm-hmm.
want DC to succeed, right? Like, some of the best, most iconic superhero stories come out of DC, right? But they've been playing a losing game, and it's their own fault, to be very
Mm-hmm.
honest. So I mean, like, I really, honestly, outside of the fact that this furrow is just like getting people rallying around it somehow, even the stars think it's gonna save their performances there. I really don't think so.
Mm.
I Yeah. How about you?
I think the stars, they want to see a better version of something that they committed so much time and effort
Sure.
into lah. And I think they believe in Snyder's original script, despite the fact that the actual cut doesn't exist, but they believe in like his vision for it lah,
Right.
and they want to see it come
Uh
true.
huh.
It's gonna take a lot of work, basically Frankenstein together this Snyder cut. With maybe additional reshoots and additional VFX and things like that, it's probably going to end up costing a lot more than
Yeah,
$30 million, to
30
be
million
honest.
is not enough.
The big deal for this is not so much for Snyder or Snyder Cut fans, who have been probably like outside of Star Wars fans, the most toxic element of like online subculture in recent times.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, good for them, like they won, right?
Yeah.
So good for them, like like them and the let's redesign Sonic people must be celebrating right now. Uh, but it's actually a big win for not so much for WB or DC, but for HBO Max, which is the new streaming service for Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
HBO Max is meant to be debuting next month with a lot of fanfare.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, after its initial slate of shows over the next 4 to 5 months, they'll be debuting new shows, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, over the next 4 to 5 months, they can't shoot new shows, so they have no new content for
Ah,
next year.
right.
Hence, I think this is why they made the decision to release the Snyder Cut, because they need something big to keep subscribers next year.
I see.
And Justice League, the Snyder Cut
It's
is
big.
a good. It's a good way, like, it's a big deal,
Yeah, it's
right?
a big deal.
And I think also that it doesn't really change cinema too much, because I feel that they've been doing this for 30 or 40 years, because DVDs and VHSs have been releasing director's cuts all the time. I think about the 7 or 8 different versions of Blade Runner that is right now.
Yeah.
There is the director's cut, there's the super director's cut, there's the original cut, there's the theatrical cut, blah blah blah. So like it's kind of been done already lah. So we've seen many quote unquote director's cuts before.
Yeah.
Basically, kind of release. It's like how comics release alternate covers. It's just like a cash grab. Um, so I'm not too cynical about it.
Uh-huh.
Will I watch it? Probably,
I'll
because I'm
I'll watch it.
curious.
I'll watch it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, like, at this point in time, it's clearly a cash grab, right?
Hmm.
And it's masked under this whole movement of people's outrage that basically a studio fucked up what was supposed to be the best kind of like superhero movie of all time for DC
At
fans.
least the combination of their beloved franchise lah.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
like, with all that kind of furrow, I'm just tired of it, I think.
Mm.
Right? Like, give us I in because of the pandemic and because of the way things are going out. It's understandable that nothing new is going to come out for a while, right? That's fine.
Actually, like for this year, it'll be fine. This year's schedule is actually totally set.
Yeah.
It's next year. Yeah.
Yeah. But give us more new stuff, guys. Like,
Mhm.
really, I think there's something we've talked about before, right? Here's like 80% of the stuff that's coming out right now in mainstream movies, at least, right, are remakes, right?
Mm.
Or just franchises that they're rebooting over and over and over again. So, outside of indie cinema, there really isn't that much original stuff that's coming out. I
Mhm.
don't know. Maybe for me, I'm just tired of hearing about the news about it because it's been going on for so long. Right.
Yeah.
Well done, guys. Like hard won battle. Kudos to everything that you're doing. I hope you guys
Yeah.
realize it's the studio's choice in the end to release it so they can get your money.
Hmm.
But yeah, I want to see. I want to see what Snyder can do. I mean, like it is an opportunity for him to kind of like get things back together, I guess, and put out something good. And if he can, like all the more to him. All the power to
Hmm.
him. The fact that he had to leave on such a tragic note
Yeah.
is a terrible thing, and I hope he manages to find something in this endeavor.
I think more than anything, like I really like that it gives some emotional closure to Zack Snyder
Yeah,
to complete this work that he left on such terrible terms,
yeah,
lah.
exactly.
Whether or not it ends up being good, it doesn't really matter. I think more than it being good or bad, I like artists being given the opportunity to finish their vision.
Yeah,
So on that front, I'm supportive of it, I guess. On another front, it does open some floodgates because are you aware that the new things have been popping up, like release the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad,
yeah.
release the Josh Trank cut of Fantastic Four, blah blah blah.
Exactly,
uh
and that's kind of like
and
what I was just talking about. Like this is
yep.
the first, like it's going to set the precedent for things to come, lah. Like whenever either fans or the studios aren't happy, like if we're talking about director's cut in the past, like all of that had to be sanctioned.
Hmm.
Those were all sanctioned by studio, right? Like it didn't come from like the fans say, oh, give me the Blade Runner's director's cut. Like that didn't
Mm,
happen, you know. So I don't
correct.
know. I mean, would you be interested in seeing a Josh Trank Fantastic Four cut?
I don't know, actually I would, because like the first like 20 minutes of it, which was purely Josh Trank, was
Uh
actually
huh.
quite good, of Fantastic Four. Yeah, I mean, if they had it, I wouldn't mind watching it. With Suicide Squad, not so much because I
Yeah,
don't care.
yeah. I
But
mean, I will watch it just to see what the changes are. But I mean, it'll be
mm,
interesting to see where this goes, right? Like if this is going to be a continuous thing, like every time someone doesn't like, what are they going to do now? They're going to tell Disney that, hey, we really didn't like the last three episodes of the Star Wars series. Can we get a new one? Right?
mhm.
I mean, yeah, it's a slippery slope argument. We really don't know where this is going to end up, or if studios will begin to think of it as another way just to make another round of money from things that they've already shot more or less, right?
Mm,
Like the 30 million that's going into this is small, is chump change compared to the initial investment they already made and didn't make back from the original theatrical release. So they are making
mm,
money anyway. All right, they are making, it's a very small investment to make a whole lot more money again.
yes.
So we'll see where this goes. Again, I want to see DC do something right, and I want to see Snyder get his due, right? Whether good or bad, as far as being able to complete this is. But I don't know. I don't know. I have a feeling that it's going to be a lot more if this works, right? And HBO/slash Warner are going to make a ton of money from this, or at least get the kind of response that they're looking for with HBO Max. It might become a lot more commonplace. So we'll just have just multiple cuts and multiple releases again,
Yeah,
because it didn't do well. Yeah.
man. I foresee like in 15 years' time, this dystopian narrative future whereby like every mainstream movie is written by fans on Twitter. It's it's a bit scary. Like
Yeah,
the
it probably will.
the 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 caving into fan service because of social media. Um, I can see good and bad points. Like fan service isn't inherently bad,
Yeah,
but to do it all the time might be bad. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, lah.
that's why we need a
Uh,
home.
yeah. Next up we have speaking of people who are just like done with the DC, right? Ruby Rose is done with Batwoman. Shockingly, Ruby Rose quit Batwoman after season one. Will not be returning for season two.
Yeah,
She gave a quote. She said, "I have made the very difficult decision not to return to Batwoman next season. This was not the decision I made lightly, as I have the utmost respect for the cast, crew, and everyone involved with the show in both Vancouver and Los Angeles." So yeah, the role of Batwoman for the first time ever, I think, on a TV show, will be recast to a new
yeah.
actress. Frankly, quite an unprecedented thing for the CW universe,
Mm-hmm.
especially. how, first of all, like, why do you think she did it? Do you believe like the rumors that she was difficult to work with? She was just exhausted from the long working hours, and secondly, how do you think the CW will proceed with recasting her?
I mean, the whole story hasn't come out yet. I think that I mean very clearly there's some sort of gag order going on. Like not every we've only heard her official statement and like the creators, and that's about it. Right now, nothing has kind of leaked off the set yet about any sort of bad behavior or anything of the sort or any kind of disagreements. So we can
Um,
probably take that.
yeah, actually, Variety actually gave like quote unquote confidential sources in, like, probably like the crew and not so much the cast, but probably like the interns on set and stuff. They were giving a lot of stories about how given the long working hours that Ruby Rose was facing, she was apparently a very unpleasant person to work with and had gotten into several
Ah,
verbal and physical fights with members of the directing staff, the writers, other co-stars. So if it sounds like from what
um,
the story that the interns and the gaffers and camera people have painted, it sounds like a very tumultuous working environment where nobody liked each other. There were fights every day, that kind of thing.
right. Okay, okay. I wasn't aware of that. Okay. Well, she was serviceable
Mm,
as Batwoman.
yeah.
Yeah. It was
Do
okay.
you
I
think
mean, like,
yeah, do you think like it has something to do with the fan reception as well, because a lot of people didn't like her as Batwoman, or even people from the LGBTQ community also didn't think like she was quote unquote gay enough, stupid things like that. I think it might be like a combination of a lot of things lah.
yeah, for sure. I mean, like, if things on set weren't great and things in the TV world, the reception wasn't great either. I mean, that's a formula just for people get tired, people just don't want to put up with that shit anymore, and this is on both. I mean, the talent side and the crew side, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, it's she's not doing herself any favors, I think. But given Ruby Rose isn't the most stellar actor.
No, no.
Yeah, and I think that's quite clear. Like she has the look for certain roles, and I do think by and large she looked the part.
Mm.
And it brought like kind of like this, edginess to the character and all of that, especially for something like CW, right? For them to
Hmm.
cast her. Um, but does it really matter? Honestly, like
No, I mean, I personally don't watch Batwoman anymore, so I don't
yeah,
care.
because I remember you and Hardy talking about, oh, like first couple episodes weren't so bad, and then after that you guys just kind of tailed off and all of that. So I haven't watched any Batwoman,
Mm.
right? I am more excited to talk about the who's possibly gonna replace her, because
Hmm.
in that, if who I hope replaces her
Yeah.
comes true, I will definitely start watching Batwoman.
Yeah, I mean, like online campaigning has begun. Stephanie Beatrice has begun like sort of campaigning for the
Yeah,
role. I think she'll be really good. The main issue with Batwoman isn't so much Ruby Rose, although she wasn't helping any.
yeah,
The main issue with Batwoman is just it's not a good show with or without Ruby Rose.
yeah. So why did you guys like drop off from the series?
Cause it sucked. It was boring. Action wasn't good. Dialogue was bad. Um, it felt very flat.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a bad show in general.
Yeah.
Sometimes the worst stretches of it reminds me of the worst stretches of Arrow. But
Oh.
unlike Arrow, right? Arrow to an extent could always be elevated by Stephen Amell. Like
Yeah.
when he was on, he could always elevate like mediocre material, and like that's something Ruby Rose can't do.
Yeah.
So at least there was Stephen Amell, but the main problem with the show isn't the star. It's just the people working behind the scenes aren't good either.
Okay.
Along with the star, yeah.
Yeah. So if that's the case, right? Do we really want Stephanie Beatrice, whom we love from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, to
Mm.
be attached to a kind of flailing project?
I mean, on the plus side, like I wouldn't mind it on her career wise because it's a payday, it's a recognizable role. She's gonna get to branch out to more mainstream, maybe action movies in the future if she does a good job in it. I see it as more of a stepping stone for her
Mm-hmm.
to
Okay.
get more media, more mainstream attention.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right. That's fair.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean,
I
I think
sorry, go ahead.
it sounds a lot like the showrunners don't have their act together.
Yep.
Yeah, and no matter how big a star you bring in, if the people who are running the show aren't doing a good job, then
Mhm.
it's hard, right? I mean, like, I love Rosa, love what Stephanie BJ is doing as Rosa as well. I really do want to see her do more things, just because I think she's
Mhm.
really talented.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I'm a bit hesitant if it's going to be that bad. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, Batwoman doesn't end up as one of those series that just like chews up different stars, with every season. It's just not a
Mhm.
good look, lah. Both for
Man,
whoever's attached to
I
it.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be weird if like Batwoman ends up being like Doctor Who, where there's a new star every couple of seasons, but Doctor Who has an in-canon explanation for why they can recast,
Yeah.
and Batwoman doesn't.
Exactly.
At the very least, I wish Ruby Rose could have made the decision a bit earlier because they could have recasted during Crisis and have an in-canon explanation for why she's
Yes.
different. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
I wish the transition had happened during Crisis, lah.
Yeah. I don't know how they're gonna deal with it in story. We'll see. We'll see.
They're probably just gonna ignore it, lah. People are just gonna, oh, that's Kate Kane now. That's who she is. She's Latino and has curly hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, we just thought that those are two big pieces of DC news that we should probably discuss, even though we're not overly invested in Snyder Cut or Batwoman.
Yep.
But the CW verse is fairly probably the biggest superhero franchise on TV,
Yep.
and
For sure.
and the Snyder Cut is just, man, it's taken a life of its own. So we probably should give our thoughts on it, lah.
Yeah. But I mean,
Yeah, man.
CW verse Legends is still great. Legends is
Yeah,
insane.
pretty much the only show that's like really genuinely great is Legends.
Legends right now, right? Yeah, and we'll
Yeah,
be reviewing that
next month.
next month, right? So yeah, stay tuned for that. I'm really really enjoying Legends right now. It's so
Yeah,
good.
man. Before we head off, like next month, of course, we'll be talking about DC's Legends of Tomorrow, which I think probably the best DC show out there. Hand in hand with like Doom Patrol.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be talking about the new season of What We Do in the Shadows.
Yes.
There's a spin-off of Penny Dreadful called City of Angels. Uh, for quick hits, I'll be another great DC show actually is Harley Quinn, which I'll be talking about.
Yep.
Speaking of the Arrowverse, I'll be talking about Stargirl next month. Um, Artemis Fowl will be released on streaming, which
Oh.
is interesting. Like Disney is not waiting for the COVID thing to end, so it'll be putting it out on Disney Plus.
Mm-hmm.
The final season of Dark, Germany's intensely convoluted, but yet quite precisely plotted time travel show Dark is coming back for
Extremely
its
precise.
extremely precise. There are no plot
Extremely
holes.
precise.
It's a bit
It,
frustrating how like there are no plot holes in there, and yet I'm still not invested in any of the characters.
yeah.
But I will watch it because I'm intrigued. Like it does a good job of making me want to find out what's next.
Yeah, for sure.
Adventure Time is coming back on HBO Max also, with 4 hour-long movies. The next one stars BMO. It's called Adventure Time Distant Lands.
Nice.
So we'll be talking about all of that next month and more with our special guest host, Chris, who is coming back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't wait for that. I'm not sure what I'm doing for. Oh yeah, I do know what I'm doing for Pull this next month. It is a new book by Nicholas Gurwitch, who wrote Perry Bible Fellowship. If you remember the comic strip,
Mm-hmm.
Actually it's a very famous online comic strip. Like I thought, like it's fucking obscure. Do you remember? Yeah, Perry Bible Fellowship. Yeah, that's the guy who did that, lah. Yeah. Can't wait for next month. It'll probably be a shorter episode,
Yep.
but still excited to talk, and a lot of big movies and TV shows coming out next month as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So till then, this has been Hidzir.
This is Isa.
Goodbye, guys.
Ciao.